Well, hello everyone, and welcome to your weekly astrological weather. My name's Amanda Walsh. I'm the founder of Astrology Hub, and I am here with Predictive Astrologer Anne Ortelee. And Anne, I didn't do this last week, so I'm gonna do it this week. Let's start with our number.
Start with our number.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I think the scale of 1 to 10 is. If I gave you 100,
No,
you
I
would
would
just
still,
go
I
to
would
like
still go to the end.
150.
Yeah. No, this week will vary between a 5 and a 10. So
Okay.
there'll be some days that are 5 and some days that are 10. And what it's really about is Mercury is going through the COVID planets in order, and he's going to talk to each of them. So he's going to talk to Athena, then he's going to talk to Jupiter, then he's going to talk to Pluto, then he's going to talk to Saturn. Remember, Mercury's in Cancer, so he's kind of sensitive. So it's going to be, how sensitive are you about the news? So the word for the week last week was decency, and we actually had it front and center all over the place. And you went decency, and I went decency, and then
Yeah,
astrology manifested decency. So this
really.
week it's projection. This week's word is projection, but you could go,
Projection.
yeah,
Okay, but hold
projection.
on. Will you tell them just
Yeah,
so last week, remember we talked about the word decency,
and you
and
went
then and I
decency.
and I was saying decency, like you never hear that word. Then Anne posted in our inner circle a headline that it was all about decency,
hmm
which amazing.
Which was decent. The word decency was used and actually cited in the Congress in the United States. So what happened was, and it's not political. It's just the congressman. I think he's from Florida. Walked up to AOC, who's a congresswoman from New York, who's got a very strong Eris and a very strong Aries. One of my students got her birth time. He actually wrote and said, "When are you born?" So we have a real time on her. But he called her excuse my French, a effing bitch. And well, he talked to her and he said mean things, and she said, "You're rude." And he turned away, and then he said it not to her directly, but as he was going. But a reporter heard it. She heard it. The reporter reported it, and she was planning on ignoring it. But then he went on the Congress floor and he said, "I didn't say it to her. No, you just said it like behind, as you were walking away." So that got her to go on the floor and go, "Not decent behavior." She actually used the word decent. You're not a decent man if you call women names. That's not decent behavior. Like
Yeah.
my mother always used to say to me, "Would you want someone to do that to you?" And I would go, because I have a Mercury Mars square, and I'd go, "No." And then she goes, "Well, then you probably shouldn't do it to them, right?"
Yes.
And so she
Well,
said, "I've thrown men out of bars for using that kind of language back when I was a bartender." But that was the word decency. So this week's word is projection. Now, whether you love AOC, you hate her, whatever.
it doesn't matter. The
It
fact is
doesn't
the
matter. The
astrology
word was
predicted
decent.
decency, which is
the word was decency in the news,
right.
and asking us to behave decently. What's decent look like? We
Right.
can agree, disagree, we can argue, we can whatever, but, behave with a modicum of respect and decorum and decency.
Right.
So this week's word is projection, because Mercury in Cancer is going to go opposite Athena, Jupiter, Saturn, or Pluto, and then Saturn. And so Mercury in Cancer is sensitive, but because it's an opposition, we have projection. Now, projection is a therapist term, and universally all therapists agree with it, but it's when you give to someone else the characteristics you're not owning in yourself, or when someone gives to you the characteristics they want you to have or they're not owning. It can go both ways. It can be positive projection, where you're madly in love with someone and then you find out they're not quite what they are. That's a crack of projection. Therapists watch what the projection is. That's why they don't tell you anything about themselves, so they can see what you project on them, because that's what your issues are. But everybody does projection all the time. It's one of those things that's very common. It's how we interact and relate. We connect to someone, and our planet lands on their planet, and we project onto them what we think that planet is. We give that planet to them, they give their planet to us, and we have a relationship, and usually there's projection involved. So it's when they say, "I always thought you were, and now I find out you're," that's harder form. Positive form is, "Wow, I really see it. And last week I went to a lecture, and the woman said, Jung quoted, when projection becomes conscious, we have a breakthrough to consciousness. We have a breakthrough to understanding when we go, wow, I gave you that, and I see now I gave that to you, and now I have to figure out what I'm going to do with it. Because I gave you my thing. I made you my mother. I made you my father. I made you my brother. And a lot of times when I'm doing a reading for someone, I'll say, well, they're kind of like your brother, aren't they? And they'll go, oh my God, you're right. Or, we just were talking with Jamie, married our mother. Oh my God, you're right. And I mean, I know when I was studying astrology, at one point I said to my astrology, my God, he's my mother. And, it's how we do it. Remember, those planets like each other, and when you break up with somebody, then you pull in somebody else in those planets. So this is a week of getting really clear. So that's part one. And it's the opposition. Now, you either have a good time with your projections or you have a bad time with them. And so that's why I'm saying 5 to 10. Because if you're having a bad time and you're not wanting to own it, that'll be a little harder. If you're having a good time, then you're going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I projected that on you. And, yeah, that's my shit. That's my stuff. Yeah. So that's the big part. Then the other thing we all want to do is look at what happened, which I told you to pay attention to last week. Look at what happened Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because Mars entered his shadow then. And what he said was, this is what we're going to be working on for the next 11 until we get to November, the rest of Mars and Aries. So Mars got there, and we're not going to really figure out what we're doing with it until we get to November 13th. But we started the story, and then when we get to November 13th, we'll figure out what action we want to take. So it's really important for everybody. Now, in the culture, there was a lot going on. We had mention of the food shortages. We had the fights in Portland. We had the guys with the leaf blowers blasting. We had, remember, across the eclipse line we talked about in the PowerPoint I did at the beginning of the year, we had stuff right along that eclipse, Portland, Louisville, whenever here, down in Georgia, right across that line. So that line is hot, that the eclipse ran across in 17, and it'll be active for 5 years, till 2023. But whatever you had go on in your own life this weekend, like whatever Mars thing popped up, look at where Aries is in your chart, that's what you're going to be working on through the fall. And in our culture, there was a lot of stuff going on. It was a busy news weekend. We don't really do politics here, but just kind of, we did AOC because it was the word decent, and I was all excited because it was in the headlines. But normally we try and avoid politics because it's also not just here. We have viewers from around the world. But watch what happened in your country last weekend, because that's the story your country is going to be trying to work out. And then watch what happened for you in your life, because that's what you're going to be working on.
So, Anne, is it necessarily literal? Meaning, so we almost had a hurricane here.
I know. It almost blew away.
And so does that literally mean that we may be dealing with issues around hurricanes and or natural disasters? Or is it how I was responding to the hurricane?
Both.
Okay.
Because it's also how you respond. So in my case, I have Mars in the second house, and it aspects Mercury. So I hear something, and I always want to understand, like, why is that happening? So with the leaf blower guys, I'm like, why are, moms went to fight, then the dads showed up with leaf blowers, and I'm like, why is somebody bringing a leaf blower to a protest? That is like so, my Mercury Mars, like, what is that about? And so this weekend I was reading an article, and it was, when they spray the gas, they do the leaf blower and they send it back at the guy spraying it to him. So I'm like, wow, what an ingenious idea, Mercury square Mars. They're so smart. So now the military guys are coming with their leaf blowers, and we're having leaf blower wars, which I was hysterical about, because I'm like, that's such a good use of the astrology, Mars. I'm going to fight you, but I'm going to fight you with air. I'm going to blow air at you. Wow. And think about it. All the phrasing that we have, we can't breathe. I have no air. We have COVID. We can't breathe. And now we've got leaf blowers being used in war.
Wow.
So say what your mother said, because Amanda reacted when I said this at the beginning. Talk about your mom here.
Oh, well, my mom, and another Capricorn
Capricorn.
woman of her, she has very few pet peeves, but one of her pet peeves is leaf blowers. She can't stand it because they're loud, they're obtrusive. She's like, why can't people just rake? So, but it's amazing, this air thing you're bringing up, because I'm remembering that several months ago, we spent a lot of time on this idea of air.
Air, right.
And how important it is, and what happens when it's constricted, not only physically, but also in our ability to listen to each other and learn from each other and love each other. You know, in quick sidebar, in Hawaii, the ancient greeting, you would put your foreheads together, look into each other's eyes, and breathe. You go, and what it does. So in my hula halau on the Big Island, we would do this every single time. We'd come together, and you do it to every single person. And I remember going into class and maybe feeling annoyed or frustrated or sort of being annoyed with one of the people or whatever. But once you do this, the breath of Ha, once you do this breath, it is impossible to hate, to be angry, to feel different from anybody, because it synchronizes your field. It's unbelievable, the technology of it.
Right.
But so again, these concepts of breath and air, and that we just brought leaf blowers to the table. Like, what?
Right. And then the masks, we put the masks on so we're not sharing the breath.
Right.
So that would then, if that's the example, that would make us be more divided. Right.
Way more divided. Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're macing people that aren't where. I mean, it's great, but it's great. That's the Mars. The Mars is a little out of control. So but it's squaring those planets. So your mother's really going to be going a little crazy that they're using leaf blowers. Just saying. And there are no shortages of leaf blowers, because then they did the leaf blower thing, and then they said no shortages at Home Depot. Oh. And then didn't I get an ad on my phone, offering to sell me a leaf blower? So I'm all right, but it's a great idea. I was like, wow, that's very ingenious. And then somebody wrote to me and said, Anne, they've been using leaf blowers in Hong Kong. And I'm like, okay, well, I didn't know there were leaf blowers in Hong Kong, but good. They've been using it at the protests there. So this is not a new idea, but it's a very ingenious idea. And so the idea of air and how we take our air, how we take our breath. And of course, Mercury is in water right now. So he's a little emotionally sensitive. The first 2 days of the week, he's in Scorpio. Then he's in Sag, which is a little more impassioned, but it's also opposite the plant. It's activating up stuff. And then the end of the week, in the weekend, it's Capricorn. So it's serious. So you really want to watch where you're projecting. And for that, you want to watch where you're either overreacting to something, you're reacting to something, and then bring it back and go, why am I reacting to this? What is it tied to? Or if someone says to you, you're blah, 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 and you're going, that's not me, that's you. Just kind of look at them and go, okay. Or what my brother used to say when we were mean to him, I know you are, but what am I? Which is a class. I know you are, but what am I? It's like, it's an opposition, right? Yeah. I was an older sister, so what are you gonna do?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so lots of things here. Anything else you want to add about the astrology for the week?
The astrology for the week also has Jupiter and Neptune sextiling, which is a big, it's part 2. There's 3 of them this year. Jupiter is lots of, Neptune is emotion, so very emotional year.
Did you say sextile?
Sextile, which is a working aspect. So Jupiter in Earth is sextiling Neptune in water. So it's a practical energy. And to your point about the hurricanes, on the news, there was one that hit Texas. There's another one. And the woman said, it's early in the season for the hurricanes to be this big.
So we should be, any place that was being potentially hit needs to be preparing for more of that. That's what I'm hearing. Okay.
Yeah. Because the Neptune, which is water, and Jupiter, which is land, and they're working together. But they're also practical dreams. Being on the pragmatic side, okay, take practical action towards your dreams. Same admonition, that the Mars in Aries is energy to be used. You do not have to fight with people. You can get mad at somebody and go, rap, 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 and then take that energy and go do something with it. That's the way to use it, because then what you're doing is you're giving it positive form. Or you can stay in and fight. And I'm like, we're going to have fighting till February, January, end of January. So I'm like, enough with the fighting. Go do something with it rather than arguing and fighting, or come up with your version of how you want to use it. Right. So that's the biggie. And then last but not least, well, let me give you the Mercury aspect so people can watch. So there was a fight aspect on the 27th, which was yesterday, Mercury squared Mars. And then on the 28th, Mercury is opposite Athena, and that's today, where you see the patterns and you understand them in a new way, or you get a strategic vision of something. Then it's going to be opposite Jupiter on the 30th, which is very much the big picture or the vision or the overarching dream. And then it's going to be opposite Pluto on the 1st of August. And it's going to be opposite Saturn on the 3rd of August, next Monday. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3. Now remember, the COVID clump is hanging out together. So as Mercury goes across, he also carries whatever you learned to the next planets. They share. He's kind of like the messenger. So he gives something from Athena, and then he goes and talks to Jupiter, and then he goes and talks to Pluto, and then so he's chatty. And then he also has a trine to Neptune in there, because he's in water. So he says to Neptune, "Oh, I got some scoop for you." So watch for news around videos, pictures, images, because, Mercury and water, Mercury, local water working with big water. So that's one. And then the other one is Venus square Neptune, but that happens today, which is understanding how I want to do with it. And then Mars aspects Athena with a square, which is fighting with people that you don't agree with. They say to you, whatever, and you go, yeah, I know you are, but what am I? I'm not fighting with you. And you get like, that kind of energy where you get mad because somebody dismisses you, that thing. And I had one of my friends, he was on some podcast or in some lecture, and somebody kind of dismissed him, and he was infuriated. And I was like, oh, that's the Mars square Athena. Like a woman went, pip, 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 or somebody went, I know more than you do. And so watch for that as a projection too. So it's kind of like, what is your truth? Where are you in your truth? What do you know for you? And watch where you're arguing with someone or you're projecting onto them anxiety, fear, confusion. And the moons are easy, emotional, but easy. But the weekend moons, like last weekend was a tough weekend for many people. This weekend is a tough weekend too, because the moon's in Capricorn, and after Mercury wakes up all those things, moon gets to the guys and goes, so you see what we're doing here? And they all go, got it. Now Mars is in his shadow officially. So everything that we go on from last weekend forward, we're working on, because once we enter the shadow, it's up, because you may not have had something last weekend, but you might have something go today or Thursday or Saturday. And if that happens, you're working on this, especially if it makes you mad, or it asks you to take action. You're working on this until the end of January.
Okay, so how long are we in shadow?
We're in shadow until we get to the station, which is August or September 9th.
Wow, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the themes between last weekend, basically, all the way to September 9th.
And then Mars stops.
And then it stops, and then it's going to go retrograde.
Back, right? And he squares all the COVID planets again.
So we'll be like redoing whatever we've been doing. Okay.
And then he stops again, and then he goes forward, and he gets out of his shadow on December 31st, but he doesn't finish the journey until the end of January. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's big.
Okay.
So watch what you're mad at. Take a diary, write it down, and then watch your kids. Watch where the Mars is, and whatever. Like look in the chart wherever Mars is at 15. We're all 15-year-olds right now. So watch your. You go. Well, I'm feeling like a bratty teenager. I'm like, that's your Mars. That 15-year-old kind of like, I can go out. I can't quite drive yet, but I can go out. Can't make me. And honoring that. And then as we get to be 29, which we think about those ages from 15 to 29, and then 29 back to 15, and then from 15 back forward as of November. But it's going to be a long process. Yeah.
Okay, so we all need to get good at working with our anger.
Yeah, or working with whatever came up. So for you, when the hurricane was bearing down on you last weekend, that was Mars. You were being attacked by a wind. What did you do? What did it bring up for you?
It was great, actually. I definitely had some moments of reacting in fear, though. So so it'll be really good for me to work with that. And I had to make an apology about it.
Okay.
Because I kind of had a moment of freak out. So I had to apologize to my ex-husband. Okay.
Always good.
Yes, exactly.
Well, that's the Mars. It's like, because it gets you. I mean, I got a little crazy. Jamie said to me before we started, how was your? I thought my weekend sucked, but I knew what I was doing. I mean, I knew why it sucked. I knew what I was clearing out. I was walking around my house talking to myself, very mad. And then I'm going, okay, so like, when are you going to get over this and put it down? You want to keep carrying. I mean, I was mad, because I have a Mercury Mars, so it gets this little vibe going. And I was like, you're going to keep carrying it? You're going to put it down. It's that monk story, I put her down on the other side of the river and you're still carrying her months later. Like, so that's the other thing. Watch where you're mad and recognize what it's doing is it's a projection. It's trying to come up and bring up something that's hidden. So when then you become aware of it, you go, like you did to your husband, okay, like I apologize. And that's good because that was you owning whatever the anxiety was that you gave him. That's how we handle it. Yeah. You go, okay, I might have overreacted a little there. Yeah. But I was afraid. Mars is fear, Saturn's fear. And I breathed. I got a little, and remember, we're messy rooms. We're not perfect. We're in process. And there's a huge hurricane coming. There's big wind in the picture, little island, water. Like what happened? Little children
transported between parents and homes. Yeah,
totally. Yep.
So let's talk about some of these themes. You brought up this theme around projection. I have a question for you.
Yes. Okay.
So I have heard, and tell me if you think this is true, that for a woman, a lot of times we will project our Mars onto a man. I guess it probably depends on your sexual orientation.
Anima and animus, yep.
Okay, so my Mars is in Leo. So for a long time, A, I was with Leos. B, I would expect them to show up as the Leo. And it wasn't until I started owning my Leo that Leos weren't so present anymore. And I was always frustrated with Leos because they didn't do it the way that I thought they should do it. But I was putting my Leo-ness on them, right? But
exactly.
So what I've also heard, and tell me if you think this is true, that men would project their Venus onto a woman and expect her to show up in those Venusian qualities, wherever his Venus is. But that when we own those aspects of ourselves, which is where astrology can be so helpful, because it's like, oh, where am I not owning my Mars? Where am I not owning my Venus? Then we can see where the projection could be happening. But tell me if you think that's true astrologically. Do you see that as a trend?
Yeah. But we can project any planet.
Okay.
But the ones we commonly project, because we pull them in on relationship, we project our Mars, we project our Venus, because that's how we attract them in. But then the other planets can all be projected. So when you pull them in on your Venus, like a guy pulls you in because you're their Venus, but then you turn into the moon and they hate their mother. And you're just like my mother. And you're like, well, you picked me. But that's what projection is, because you can attract it and get, it's like your little, your flower, and you're sitting there, hi, I'm a flower, bee, come here, bee, come here. And the bee comes, and then you're like hanging out, and you're like, and then the bee flies away, and you're like, you left me, you bee, but it's your beedom that your essence that you pulled them into. Does that mean beedom? I don't have it. Now, bees are going to be in the news this week. I'm doing the birds and the bees here. But yeah, we do give we also give other people our unowned parts. Okay. So a lot of times, if it's a section of our chart we really don't like, we'll give that to other people, right? And they'll do it for us, because we don't own it. So that's the other beauty of astrology, is that's your planet. if I take this is a gun, if I take this gun and I put it over here and you pick it up and shoot me, you're using my gun, but it's my gun. So if I own my gun and I say, hey, that's my gun, give it back to me, then you drop the projection. So this week, whatever you're giving to someone else, you're going to see, and you're going to be asked to take responsibility for it and understand how you want to work with it. Right.
Some good questions to ask. I mean, if you find yourself triggered by someone else and it's like, oh, he's so blank and I hate when she does blank. Anytime we're having those thoughts, it's like, wait, okay, are those things in me? Like, do I have those things in me? Is there way that I'm showing up that way?
Right.
And if we can take that moment to reflect, it can be so revealing. Yes. And enable that chance for self-responsibility. It's like, okay, well, yeah, sometimes I do show up that way. So if I don't like it in them, how can I start shifting that in me and showing up differently?
Or owning that thing. So
owning it, yeah.
Or owning it. So in the case of your mother, who's a Capricorn, why can't they just rake their leaves?
Right.
Like, what is so hard about getting a rake? Because Capricorn is about doing the work, right? But Aquarius is about air. So they've done the work by getting a blowing air machine, right? And she's like, that's not how you rake.
They're not doing it the right way.
They're not doing it the right way. So that also is, so that watching what that, and you may say, well, I just think, and they are noisy and they are obnoxious, but right now they're helpful. I mean, what are you going to do with the rake with poison gas, right? You're going to, I mean, but your mom, and remember, everybody comes from their own chart, their own perspective in the world. So we all have our own perspective, which is what your chart describes. What you think is the right way and the wrong way. And this whole opportunity when the structures are changing, and we all have on those structures a projection of the government's good, the government's bad, the government's too much, the government's too liberal, the government's too progressive, the government's too conservative, the government's too controlling, the government doesn't do. We all have that. What is your projection on the authority that's not taking care of you the way you want, that's making you get mad?
And how can you start taking care of yourself? I mean, so much of what you've been saying, this inner authority, what you said a few weeks ago, I think about a month or two ago, and it's really like stayed with me. I'm sure it stayed with a lot of people in the audience too. Yeah. But if at the end of the year, we have found a place of inner authority, then it's all been worth it, essentially. I mean, like this is the theme. This is the invitation from your perspective for the entire year. So all those places where we're projecting what the authorities should be doing for us, those are all huge opportunities
for us to do for ourselves.
To do for ourselves, for our community, for our family. So, I mean, this has been a huge decision-making factor in my decision to go to a homeschool community this year and be doing the homeschool thing, because it was like, well, they should be doing this and they should be teaching that and they should be focusing on that. It's like, well, maybe you should do that. Maybe you need to seize this and take ownership for it instead of thinking everybody else should take care of it. So it's huge for us. Okay, so we have these things around projection and this opportunity. As always, it's never to punish us. It's not like we're going to be projecting and angry to punish us.
Well, some people have an angry God. Some people have a punishing God. Right. And if they have a punishing God and they want to feel punished,
they're going to have lots of opportunity.
Yeah, well, they want to be punished, so this is a good year to be punished.
Ooh.
Right? If they want to, well, no, it is. It's if you want to be like, okay, punishing God's getting me, then we go, okay, let me come up with a different way to work with God. Because it's Jupiter Neptune. How do we want to work with the divine?
Right. So I have 13 years of Catholic school.
I have Catholic school too, yeah.
So I have had a lot of things to work with. And but the biblical statement about you reap what you sow continues to come to me this year. And that's what you're saying. So if we're reaping, if we're sowing fear and we're sowing hate and we're sowing aggression, we're going to reap it. Like it's going to be coming back. And the the other side of that is true too.
Yes.
So if we're sowing love, if we're sowing understanding, if we're sowing compassion, then that's going to come back to us. And it seems so instant this year. It's
It
like,
is.
it's like boom, like
It's like
you make,
fast karma.
yes.
Fast karma
Yeah.
year. Yes.
Okay.
And it
So
is.
lots of,
It's two reasons it's fast. It's cardinal, and then there's 3 planets there, and they are all like, "Oh, you want to manifest that? I'll give it to you." And then you're
right.
like, "No, no, no, I didn't want that." You know,
So what do
or
you want?
what do you want? I think
Yes.
I want this. You know, so I'm not going to say don't rant and rave. You might be frustrated. You might be angry because you do. You need to get it out. And then once you get it out, you want to go, oh, I feel better now. Thank you for listening. Okay, now what do I want to do about it?
Well, and if you're doing that to actually as a loving response for yourself,
To
like just
release
needing to get it out, and you're not hurting a ton of people in the process,
just the
that's
cats.
actually
I just scare the
just
cats.
the cats. Great. I mean, they can handle it.
They
But
can.
that's actually a loving thing to do because you're allowing yourself the space to do that. And wouldn't it be great if everybody had the space to do that in a healthy way,
Yeah.
but with the intention to move beyond it, not to stay stuck in it and not to put it on everybody else.
Right. Right.
Right? Okay, because if we're just going to hurt more people in the process, and then we're sowing hurt,
Hurt.
we're sowing pain, and
We're
we will have
perpetuating.
that back. Okay,
Yep.
so lots of opportunities for self-awareness this week with this whole
Mm-hmm.
projection theme. I think this is really interesting around air. It's something to pay attention to, and I have a question for you. But air as a connector, but also air as a weapon. And I don't think any of us would have, well, maybe people would have thought about this before, but air being a potential weapon that we use against each other, and how powerful it is as a weapon, but that also shows us how powerful it is as a place of connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so just for me, that's more of like a contemplation. Like, where am I holding, and we're not talking literal about masks and things like that, but like, where am I holding my breath? Where am I constricting? Where am I using my breath or my air or my thoughts as a weapon
Mm-hmm.
against myself or other people? I mean, these are all really powerful things to be considering right now. And my question is,
And also, when you give birth, they teach you to breathe.
you have to
When you
breathe.
do yoga, they teach you to breathe because they teach you
Yes.
how powerful the breath is. And remember breath. My father was a physician, and he was like 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without air. Right? That's how you die. So air is really, really important to us. And we hold our breath when we're nervous, right? I mean, not all people, but there's fight, flight, or freeze. Freeze is don't move, don't breathe, so they don't know you're alive. You know, when you
Well,
play
and
dead, I used to
yeah,
play dead with the dog, and he would be like, oh, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? I don't have a dog anymore because you have to walk them in New York. But when I was a kid, and it, that freezing, a few years back, they had those guys freezing, in Grand Central, they froze like 200 people. It's really a cute ad. There were all these people at rush hour, and then they all froze. And like people are walking around going like, all these frozen people, like, what the hell, did I not get a message? It's a very cute ad. The flash mob's freezing. But yeah, freezing, holding the breath. Big. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go.
no, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
great. We could explore this for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring Hawaii back in because they
Mm-hmm.
understood the power of breath, the connectivity of breath, not only to each other, but also to the divine. And so there's two words, haole, which has become a derogatory term for white people, but it's not. It actually just means haole, which means without breath, because they noticed when everybody started coming over here that the people didn't breathe. They didn't breathe. They didn't breathe together. They didn't come together in prayer and breathe. Ohana, which also means family, but oha, you hear that ha again, and aloha, it's in all the languages about breath, but ohana means a group of people who come together and breathe together. So it's this importance of breath to connect us to ourselves, to each other, and to God, or the divine source, is present in these indigenous cultures and these indigenous practices, in those ancient technologies where we're using the body to connect to something bigger than us. So,
And conspiracy means breathing with each other.
wow,
That we breathe to
conspire.
conspire. We breathe together. We work, our breaths are shared. So yeah, so it's big. Breath is big.
Big. It's big. And I remember doing a podcast interview before Saturn went into Aquarius.
Hmm.
And the astrologer that I was talking to said, well, Saturn in Aquarius is going to bring fear of the air. It's going to bring fears around air. And now look, I mean, it's everybody's afraid of what can be passed through the air. So again, it's this literal. So
Very literal.
my
Astrology is
question is,
always very literal. It's right down to the basics. Yes.
so Saturn in Capricorn is where we're at now. We're going to be going back to Saturn in Aquarius next year
December.
in December.
In December.
Do you think that this fear of the air thing is going to continue? It's going to get bigger? Like, what would you say Saturn in Aquarius will bring in terms of that theme?
Definitely air. I mean, I've got clients in Australia. They opened it up. They were quarantining people. The people were partying, and the virus took off again. So Australia's like, we want to be like New Zealand where nobody comes to visit us. And the governor's like, prime minister's like, we have to let people in. So Saturn in air is a big shakeup in the airline industry, right? Because we're not going to be able to travel. We've gotten banned. While Saturn was in Aquarius, we got banned from going to the EU. That's Saturn restricting air.
Whoa.
It's very literal, very literal.
Whoa. And so Saturn will be in Aquarius for 2 years.
2.5 years.
Okay. Interesting.
Boat trips off of Hawaii.
Well, it's very interesting to be on an island and have those kinds of things because it's like, my whole family's in California. I also heard that, I literally was hearing from someone today who was like, our travel is going to be restricted for 2 more years, at least.
That's Saturn in Aquarius. Yeah.
Okay, everybody breathe.
Well, the idea is, Saturn in Capricorn says, think about it like, you think about it as a giant tsunami or a giant, tidal wave or hurricane. It comes in, it kind of blows out the area. And then we rebuild, so you have to clear it out, then you rebuild. And that is really happening all over the world. So we have to rebuild all over the world. And then once we get that up and running, then we get to Saturn in Pisces and we can get together and merge again. And remember, it's going to depend on where Saturn is in your own chart, where you're going to be doing it, because where Aquarius is in your own chart, that's the area where your chart's going to be being asked to step up and take responsibility. And yes, he restricts air. But if we say, well, if I had a mother, she's got to take a kid to her ex is in England. So she has to go. She's 2 weeks quarantine from Australia, 2-week visit, 2-week quarantine back in Australia when she gets home, 6 weeks 6 weeks out of work. How many people can do that, right? So it's going to be practical, practical components of it too. Plus, if the economy craters, which nobody's talking about it yet, but that's going to happen. Nobody's going to have any money to travel, right?
So it's back to our local communities and how we can support each other and how we can come together. And okay, so then we have Jupiter, Neptune, sextile, which is around practical dreams. So why do you say that, and how do we work with practical dreams?
Well, Jupiter's our vision. He's our vision house. He rules Sagittarius and he rules Pisces. Sagittarius is our education house. Pisces is literally when we dream, we go to sleep. So with Neptune sextiling Jupiter in Capricorn, he's in an earth sign. He's down to earth and he's saying, okay, let's put the dreams, because Neptune is dreams, let's put the dreams on the ground and understand what they are. And we have to work with our dreams in a practical way. Like if we're not going to travel, how are we going to make our living? How are we going to do our work? What are we going to do about that? So that practical nature of the dream, what makes sense. And also because everything's structurally changing with the Capricorn planets, we say, well, with all these changes, everybody goes back to life is normal. I'm like, no, dream the new life. What's the new life look like? What does that become? And how do we get to there, and what that looks like. And as we restructure the dream, then we go, well, that's the dream. That's what makes sense for us. You know?
And do you think there's going to come a point where those dreams or visions for what it all could look like will be more clear? Because I think a lot of people right now, the biggest thing that's up is kind of just, well, I think a lot of grief and a lot of anger. There's all these things that are happening for people that make it harder to be in that dream
Space, right?
place of like, okay, well, what could this be? Is there going to be a time where we have more energy behind that piece of it?
Well,
The dreaming.
we have a lot of energy right now with arguing with it. That's why I'm saying
Arguing with it, right?
Don't argue with what's going on.
Right.
Take action on your own behalf to do something positive about it.
Yeah.
The instinct is go argue with it. It's like, no, don't argue with it. What do you want to do to make it happen? And you may say, well, I have to argue with it to get it to happen. And then I'm like, okay, that's your chart. My chart says better for me not to argue with it, better for me to go over here and do this instead. It's understanding we're all going to be called to go do the work someplace, and that's what we're being called to do. But you want to watch for when you feel like it's a distraction, or when you feel like it's not really what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be doing this thing over here instead. And that's a very quiet voice. So if you're really mad, you may not hear it. You may not hear it, but that's okay. Life is patient. We got this for 6 months. Right now, you might be going, meh, 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 meh. I'm like, it's okay. Mars is going to go retrograde from September to November. You're going to figure it out then, because he's not letting you get off the hook. He's going to 1, 2, 3, and you're going to get it. So the idea is, and a lot of people go, well, I don't have a dream. My dream died. I'm like, I hear you. Your dream died. So figure out your expediency now, and then figure out what else is important, what else is calling you, and why. So we know that after pandemics, there's a renaissance, because the people that are home, not able to go out, do this really great creative work, and a whole new birth comes from that. It's out of the structure that's torn down, new things happen. And all of us are having the pandemic somewhere in our chart. We're all having our structures torn apart and brought into something else. And that we don't know yet what that is.
I like that question that you just posed. What else is calling me? And I think even if you don't know the answer to that question yet, it's okay. Like
Right.
just walking with that question will be enough to start getting insights and getting, having conversations that light you up. And it's like, oh, maybe I'm being called in a whole new place. And I never would have thought of this before. So,
Because I was so in this life.
Right.
And now that life is not really there, really. And it might be more like you go, well, I don't want to do that anymore. It might be a negative. And so you say, well, what would you want to do instead? And you go, well, I'd like to do that. So then go do that. And
Right.
as you start to do that, the voice will get a little louder, because you're getting called where you're supposed to go. Never doubt that your chart guides you where you're supposed to go. When I was a baby astrologer and I was in the obsessive phase, I went back and looked at all the major events in my life, and they were all described by the chart. So this as a major event has been described in your life since you were born. So we're all having it for a reason, and we're all being asked, this is this major event that you're going to take 2020 and part of 2021 to figure out, and then after that, new life. So trust the process, trust your chart, and trust that you're here on Earth to do this work now at this time. What is the work you're being asked to do? That's the other way to look at it.
Right. So we have two resources for those of you going, well, gosh, I want to know more about my chart. I don't know. Is the course we do with Anne, the Do Your Saturn Workshop. I think it's just astrologyhub.com/Saturn. Astrology Hub. And then the other one is Your Soul Purpose, which is a course that we did, and it features 5 different astrologers who help you look at different points in your chart from the perspective of what is your soul purpose? Like, what are you here to do? And so using this time to understand your chart and that's the blueprint that you came in with. That's the grand design. And so to have the more understanding you have, the more self-awareness, the less you're going to project, the less you're going to spend your time wasting in anger and some of these other things, because you can started moving in the direction that you came here to go anyways.
Yeah.
But so that would be astrologyhub.com/your soul purpose, I hope. If it's not that link specifically, then just go to astrologyhub.com and go to Academy, and then you'll see your
You'll
soul
see it.
purpose. Yeah. So, so then the other thing is the final like big theme that you brought up today is this theme around anger. And so looking at what's inciting anger in you, seeing where potentially that's authority or power you've given to someone else that you can start to own. And then also just getting good with your process with anger. I mean, it sounds like you healthfully did it this weekend. You were having anger and you just worked it
Stomp around
out.
the house. And I mean, that's the whole point. And, a lot of times, and this is something that happens a lot of times with women, or, depending on your childhood, how you were raised, was no anger. Anger is a natural emotion. If we don't let it express, we get depressed. So because it turns inward and it comes depression. So I'm very cautious. When I was 19, I had I had an ulcer, and the doctor said to me, "Well, you're not expressing what you're upset about." And I'm like, "Right, I'm not supposed to," because that was the training. And he's like, "Well, no, if you talk about it, the ulcer will go away." I'm like, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "All right." Talked about it, the ulcer went away. So I'm very clear. I don't want an ulcer again. I'm going to talk about it.
Right.
Right. So you want to, and I know whenever I feel I'm a little depressed, it's usually because I haven't felt comfortable expressing something I'm unhappy with. And at one point in my life, I had a therapist, and when I would express something I was unhappy with, she would go, "Did anybody die?" And I'd be like, "Nope, nobody died." So now because in my chart it says if you say what that is, somebody could die. So I'm like very careful. Nobody died when I said what I needed to say. Yeah. But that you have an inhibition. Everybody's got we all got trained, right? So I learned how to say it nicely. I worked in corporate America. You learned how to deliver bad information in a nice way.
The sandwich. The
Yeah.
compliment sandwich. Something good, something not so good, something really good.
Yeah, you just kind of stick it in there, and then you say, "Well, I did tell you," and they go, like, "Yeah, it's right there," But yeah, that's you have to learn. But that's a trait that's taught. In my house, it was like we don't say that.
Well, and the emotion that goes along with the anger is the challenging part. So that's the one. But it's also where there's so much power when we actually can use it, when we can alchemicalize it and harness it in a direction. It's super powerful. So it's not something to be like stuffed away.
No, it should be. You should let it out, because otherwise it's rattling around in the closet causing problems. And a lot of times when people have had a difficult experience around abuse, or Mars, of course, is abuse. Mars is violence. Mars is whatever. And if they don't talk about it, it rattles around in the closet, causes problems. And when they talk about it, it calms down because it leaves their body. Right. And so that's part of the, the journey of becoming. And if we look back on the cathartic energy of the Me Too movement, right, where we would say, okay, I talked about it and it made it go away. And when you heard about people that didn't talk about it and how they felt depressed or they felt oppressed or repressed, it was, talking about it makes it better. Secrets are toxic when they're bad secrets. Not to say all secrets are toxic, but if it's a bad secret, it can be very toxic. And toxic is Mars or poison, Scorpio. Yeah.
Okay.
So we want to encourage, and you may not want to tell anybody. You may want to just go hang out in your closet and talk to your shirt. That's okay. Just get it out of your body.
Yeah. Okay. Really good. Amazing things to work with. We have our projection theme. We have looking at the Mars in Aries in its shadow and the themes that are showing up now, understanding that this is going to be our curriculum for the next couple months.
Till January. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So maybe start writing down, what the themes are so you can actually bring some consciousness to it and start to really even bring in resources to help you work with it. That'd be good. And then these ideas around air. Go ahead.
Great book, The Dance of Anger. Excellent book for helping with anger. Yeah.
Awesome. The Dance of Anger. Okay. Very good. And then also paying attention to what you're seeing in other people, both good and bad, and how you can start to own those things. So if there's things you see about people that you really like, it's like, gosh, I love how so-and-so does that, it's like, well, maybe that's something that you want to own.
You really want to do. Yeah.
Yes,
You really
exactly.
want to know how to do that. Yeah.
Exactly. And then this practical dreams. So spending some time to think about what am I being called to next, and how can I start taking practical steps in that direction,
Right.
like real tangible steps.
Right.
And so spending this time on dreaming in our new life. Okay, Anne, amazing. Thank you so much.
Always fun, Amanda. Big hugs.
Always fun. I so look forward to this time every single week. It's really
me
early.
too. Yeah.
It's early in the morning for me, so I wake up early. It's like, oh yes, I get to be with Anne and all of you. It's just so much fun.
It's fun. Yeah, I have a great time, so it's good.
All right.
Thank you all for listening, and remember, it's intermittent week, so you may find someone coming to you crying about the projection, and you're listening, and so help them see the projection too.
There you go.
Yeah, so it might be something you're witnessing. You're like, oh, that's not happening to me. That's happening to them. But help them see it, because in that seeing of the projection is consciousness.
Yes.
That's the dawning of consciousness. So it's an area you're going to be conscious about when you own the projection. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
It's good.
And thanks to all of you for being here. If you want to sign up for our free horoscopes that are written by Christopher Renstrom,
who's a great astrologer. We love Christopher.
He's awesome. Talk about fun. You can do so. Go to astrologyhub.com/horoscope, and you'll get your free sun sign and or rising sign horoscope for each week. So again, that's astrologyhub.com/horoscope. All right.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody. See you next week. Okay. Bye.